The danger to our country is grave. The danger to our country is growing.
Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Iraq's weapons of mass
a
destruction.
clear threat to the United States.
There's dozens of ballistic missiles.
It has sponsored and sheltered terrorists.
Paying suicide
Chemical
bombers.
weapons are equally true.
Biological weapons, including anthrax and botulism toxin.
Biological and chemical agent to kill millions of people.
Chemical weapons, including VX and sarin, mustard gas.
To a massive and sudden horror.
Massive death and destruction.
Good morning, Jim. I'm live in the fabled court of public opinion, where a trial unlike any other we have ever seen is about to get underway. Never before in our lifetimes has a lack of public confidence and mistrust about the justification for war resulted in a theatrical trial of a president and his vice president. The prosecution is led by public interest lawyers, while the defendants are represented by some of the best connected law firms in the land. Our legal correspondent tells us that while a sitting president can't be convicted in a criminal court, if things don't go well for him here, well, some are saying impeachment hearings are next.
Glorious are the days made in the image of the Lord. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing mighty well, I think, sir.
I'm doing quite well, thank you. Sir, I must be frank with you. The President does not need this lawsuit. And I've told him that we may yet come to an accommodation. Don't you agree?
Well, if he's willing to go to jail, I think we could agree.
Have it your way. We can only render unto Caesar what is his.
Sir, I would most certainly appreciate it if I could have a little document you have called Foreign Suitors for Iraqi Oil. If you were a true Christian, you would follow the rules and get me that document.
I'm not sure I know what you refer.
The oil exhibit. How many times must I ask you for it, sir?
I couldn't give you that document, even if I had it, which I'm not saying I do. But a very good morning to you, sir.
Mr. Prosecutor, I hear you're working for the Iranians.
Ah, you wound me, sir. I can't help that, I'm afraid.
Wound you? You wound the entire democratic system of things, bringing our president and vice president here. So don't talk to me about wounding.
My wound for the open today, I believe.
All rise. Seated. This is the case of the people versus George W. Bush and Richard Cheney.
The court has excused the defendants from attending these meetings due to international security duties. In deference to the Commander-in-Chief's executive privilege, none of the testimony will be sworn, and there will be no depositions. Prosecution, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. And to the Court of Public Opinion, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll begin with a little history lesson, I think. Back in 1215, a group of angry barons met with the King of England and forced him to stop using his power without restraint. The Magna Carta was drafted, and the king was hereafter made subordinate to the law. And that was a very pivotal moment in history. For without that initial confrontation, Your Honor, there would be no Constitution, no Bill of Rights, and no rule of law. But sadly, Your Honor, we have a sitting president who, if he were allowed, would undo 700 years of our society's most important legal traditions. We have a president who is wanting to treat our citizenry like a king's subjects. We are here today to establish that the defendants, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and the unnamed defendants, former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, lied about their justifications for war and lied about their intentions for going to war. And that this malicious lying constitutes a violation of Section 371, Title 18 of the United States Criminal Code. But oh, there's more, Your Honor, such as Colin Powell's charades before the United Nations, war crimes from the Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, and a federal judge's recent ruling that this administration's secret wiretapping program is a felony. But we will keep this trial simple, Your Honor. We are just here to prove the defendant's fraud.
On behalf of the President, Ranger.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Constitution says that the President has the power to act in time of war. So this case is not about the law. Its purpose is to undermine our people's faith in their President. Democracy and freedom are in retreat all over the world. Terrorism is spreading like a rampant infection. And our world today is threatened by terror, hatred, and cabals of evil. Let's see the prosecution's idealism hold back these relentless waves of violence. When the gales of misfortune blow, Your Honor, it is the captain, and the captain only, who must seize control of the ship, or we will all go down together. In this national security crisis, the law must give a bit. That is the issue before us today. This case is about maintaining the power that our leaders need to guide us through this storm. At the proper time, we will ask Your Honor to dismiss this frivolous case. Thank you.
Mr. Pounder, I believe you represent Mr. Cheney.
Well, there it is, Prosecutor. That little wounding we talked about a little earlier this morning. Your Honor, that's Vice President Cheney. I mean, no disrespect to you. But that's just exactly what this case is all about. It's an attempt to humble our freedom fighters, our soldiers in the field. I make a motion, Your Honor, right here and now for disclosure. Disclosure as to who these public interest attorneys really represent. Who dares question the integrity of one of history's most courageous vice presidents?
Mr. Prosecutor, do you want to say anything about whom you represent?
Well, certainly, Your Honor. I will name my so-called Iranians when these gentlemen named the members of Dick Cheney's Secret Energy Task Force. We might see whether or not they have more terrorists supporting them than us.
Enough of that now. I assume that you're funded by the ACLU or some such organization like that. All right, you may go ahead and proceed. Call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People call Congresswoman Barbara Worthy.
Congresswoman Worthy, please take the stand.
Good morning, Congresswoman.
Good morning.
Congresswoman, how did you vote on the October 2002 resolution authorizing the use of force against Iraq and the subsequent funding for that war?
I voted for it.
And who, madam, persuaded you to do so?
Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld.
How?
Their case for war with Saddam was based on his having weapons of mass destruction and his having ties to Al-Qaeda and the 9/11 attacks. But all of this was false, misleading information given to Congress and to the American people.
And so, how did you first become concerned about a supposed Iraq weapons of mass destruction connection?
In August 2002, Cheney began to make speeches saying that Saddam would soon be obtaining a nuclear weapon. And in September, Bush described a report from the International Atomic Energy Agency describing that Saddam would be developing a weapon within months.
Oh my gosh, well I guess that settles it then. We may just as well drop this case.
Except that after we voted, we discovered no such report existed.
You don't say. I wonder if we might see a pattern developing here today. Congresswoman, how did the defendants convince you of an Iraq 9/11 connection?
Bush and his officials said that Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker of the 9/11 attacks, had met with Iraqi intelligence. But after we voted, we learned from the CIA that this was untrue.
And regarding his constitutional responsibility to consult with Congress, how did you find out that this president never really did?
He met with us a month before we voted on the authorization. At that time, he said he hadn't decided whether we were going to war or not. But evidence since then has shown that he decided long before that.
So, had this president actually begun performing real acts of war?
Before he met with us, he had begun to order illegal bombing campaigns outside the no-fly zone to weaken Saddam's air defenses. And he had begun to divert congressionally appropriated funds from Afghanistan.
Objection. Hearsay.
Congressman, do you know these things firsthand?
They're a matter of public record, statements from the defendants and others involved.
I'm going to sustain that objection, counsel. You're welcome to present any supporting evidence.
Okay, Congresswoman, what then did you personally see and hear?
In June 2002, I heard the President announce an unprecedented policy of preventive war, meaning that the United States could invade any country Bush wanted as long as he thought there was even a potential threat.
Ah, yes. The infamous Bush Doctrine. Well, Congresswoman, didn't at least Don Rumsfeld tell you the truth?
He told us he knew where the weapons of mass destruction were. He told us Saddam had remote-controlled planes ready to drop chemical and biological weapons on our cities.
And so you relied on him.
Well, you'd think the Secretary of Defense would know what he was talking about. Unfortunately, his statements were also false.
And so you authorized force based on these defendants' warnings.
They made it sound like we would be attacked any day.
Gosh, very prudent of you, madam. So when did the Iraq War actually begin?
Officially, it began March 20th, 2003.
And madam, when was the last time that this president told us that he had not yet decided to go to war?
At a press conference 2 weeks before the war began.
2 weeks before the war, and this president was still saying that he was doing his level best to prevent it.
Yes, let me just read to you from the press conference transcript. Page 2. Across the world and in every part of America, people of love and goodwill are hoping and praying for peace. Our goal is peace. And then, on page 4, I don't like war. No one likes war. War is forced on us because Saddam has made that choice. Page 6. I hope we don't have to go to war. Page 7. In the name of security and peace, if we have to, we'll disarm him. And then the coup de grace. Page 8. If we were to commit troops, I would pray for their safety.
Oh, doesn't that just make you a little bit sick?
Objection.
Careful there, counsel.
Congresswoman, let's see. What did the President say to you at his State of the Union address that year?
He said,
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. Our intelligence sources tell us that he has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes suitable for nuclear weapons production. Saddam Hussein had biological weapons sufficient to produce over 25,000 liters of anthrax, enough doses to kill several million people.
And you swallowed it whole. Hook, line, and sinker. Didn't you? Congresswoman, are you aware of a little meeting that took place a couple of days later between this president and British Prime Minister Tony Blair? Something about an airplane.
I've read the report. Only 2 days later, January 31st, Bush met with Tony Blair, and he proposed painting a United States plane in United Nations colors and flying it low so that perhaps that could draw fire from Hussein and that could start the war.
Oh my God. This happened 2 days after this president said that he would only go to war if he were, in his words, forced to.
Yes.
And so the Congress just kept swimming along like a school of innocent fish, didn't they?
Well, we didn't know about the plane at that time. You have to trust the president, don't you know?
No, madam, I don't know. But thanks for asking. Congresswoman, isn't it true that all of these things, the bombs dropped outside the no-fly zone, the anthrax scares and the mushroom clouds, the diversion of funds from Afghanistan, this little game concocted by Bush and Blair to try to start up the war, wasn't all this occurring, madam, in the year before this president was saying that he would only go to war if he were forced to?
That is correct.
Would you buy a used car from this man?
Objection, Your Honor. That's inflammatory hollow.
Sir!
Sustained, sustained. All right.
I wouldn't
Ignore
need
that remark.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Defense. Cross-examination.
Congresswoman Worthy, a nuclear attack on the United States would be catastrophic, would it not? And the odds of that happening, well, we all would hope would be very small. But the president and his staff would have to plan for such an event because it's their responsibility to make sure that such a horrendous event never happened. Am I correct?
Yes.
So the prudence, therefore, requires that they make plans all the time, not just at that specific moment, all the time, right?
But to launch a war of aggression, to invade a country that did not threaten us, is not just planning.
Congresswoman, it's obvious that you're merely suggesting that the president and his staff were mistaken. And we all make mistakes, do we not?
Every mistake led in the same direction, toward escalation and war. I guess if it wasn't premeditated fraud, they were just plain foolish.
Well, that's certainly not a crime.
But oh, Your Honor, we will stipulate that they were fools.
And we'll stipulate that you guys are cowards.
Fools are liars.
All
Take
right,
your pick.
all right, quiet now, enough. This is no bar room.
Congresswoman, you don't have access to top secret documents. So it would only seem proper that you would rely on the best intelligence that we have, say from the Pentagon, the Defense Department, wouldn't it?
Defense Secretary Rumsfeld told us they had bulletproof evidence of a connection between Saddam and Al-Qaeda, and more than half of Americans believed him. But the CIA showed there was no such evidence.
You know, it's rather quaint, relying on these old principles of common law fraud. Do you know when these were established?
Well, of course I do, but why don't you tell me?
All right. They were established before jet planes that fly into towers, before nuclear weapons, before machine guns, before our Constitution. And you would apply principles that governed the marketplace of medieval Europe to terrorists who fly jet planes.
Possibly not.
Well then, shouldn't our presidents today be different too, must they not?
In some ways, yes.
You know, we can't go on defending our nation with knights in shining armor on padded horses. You, I'm assuming, would fight these terrorists, these sophisticated bomb-making terrorists, with principles of law that are 700 years old. You know, you're only talking about telling Congress a few more details, aren't you? It's always a judgment call, especially when it comes to matters of national security.
I'm talking about purposefully, deliberately leaving out critical facts so that Congress could not make an informed decision about going to war, to invade a country with which we were at peace.
You must be aware that past presidents have had to bend the law in times of war. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. FDR put the Japanese in concentration camps. Truman seized the steel mills.
Yes, but it's not healthy for our republic.
But it does happen, doesn't it? Over and over and over again. Because war is different than peace. You would admit to that, wouldn't you?
That war is different from peace? Usually, yes.
You know, all the statements that you've been complaining about, not one of them was made under oath before God, were they? They could have been political speeches or press releases or maybe even the kind of standard puffery that every politician does. Couldn't they?
I suppose so.
Congresswoman, during your campaigns, you ever exaggerate? Maybe put a little spin on things, bend the truth ever so little?
Answer the question.
Sometimes we do, I suppose.
And you certainly wouldn't want us to throw you into jail for that now, would you?
No.
And you wouldn't expect us, therefore, to throw these defendants into jail for doing just what you do, would you? Of course you wouldn't. Nothing further.
Prosecution, redirect.
Congresswoman, have you ever made up false facts for Congress in order to persuade the people's body to exercise its war-making powers? No. You ever stand up and say, "We know where the weapons of mass destruction are"? No. You ever make a speech calling for peace and 2 days later design a ruse with a fake airplane to draw Hussein into war?
No, I have not.
I didn't think so. So, now that you know Saddam was telling the truth about not having weapons of mass destruction, and there was no connection between Saddam and the 9/11 attacks, if you were given a chance to rescind congressional authorization for the use of force in Iraq, would you do so?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, you may be excused.
Yes, it's me. There are people in this courtroom, I don't even know who they are. We need to get somebody over here with a camera, get some pictures taken, some background checks done. And let's do one more thing. Let's check the judge's email. Somebody's paying for all of this. Syrians, Iranians, I don't know exactly, but somebody is. Now get to Fox. The war on terror is being undermined in this courtroom here today. And I gotta go.
All rise.
Be seated. Prosecution, call your next witness.
The people call Agent Smith, Your Honor, retired from the CIA, and as for purposes of national security, Smith is a pseudonym.
Agent Smith, please take the stand.
Agent Smith, you coordinated United States intelligence on the Middle East from 2000 through 2005, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Please describe the relationship between what the CIA told the President about Iraq's nuclear weapons program and what Bush told Congress.
Well, in his State of the Union address, Mr. Bush said that the nation of Iraq was a grave and growing danger. But only 1 month earlier, our report had said that Iraq did not have nuclear weapons, that they were not likely to get nuclear weapons, and they were certainly not trying to reconstitute their nuclear weapons program. You see, what Bush told the Congress was exactly the opposite of what we told him.
The opposite of what you told him. Were there other examples of this?
Certainly. Later that year, we issued a report that Iraq was most likely not to use nuclear weapons, even if they had them, and yet the President continued to warn the Congress.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun, that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
So that makes two. Any other ways this administration tried to persuade Congress?
Oh, yes. Well, White House gave Congress a report saying that they had the intelligence to support the claims that Saddam was very dangerous.
And of course, this report was complete.
Certainly not. It was a very selective, edited version of one of our earlier reports. Theirs was crafted by the propaganda offices of both the White House and the Pentagon.
Objection, Your Honor.
No insinuating remarks, please, Agent Smith.
Certainly. What Congress received was crafted by the, well, Pentagon's Office of Special Plans. The Congress did not receive the full information which we gave the administration.
Prosecution submits Exhibit A. A certified copy of the Defense Department's Inspector General's conclusion of February 2007.
Proceed without objection?
No objection.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry. Please examine this document. Regarding the supposed connection between Saddam and the 9/11 attacks, what did the Defense Department's own Inspector General conclude?
Well, according to this report in 2007, the Pentagon Policy Office, that's the Office of Special Plans, produced intelligence reports on supposed connections between Iraq and Al-Qaeda that contradicted the rest of the intelligence community.
All right. Prosecution submits Exhibit B, a certified copy of the official 9/11 Commission report.
Defense, no objection?
Agent Smith, can you read for us, please, the highlighted sections from the 9/11 Commission report?
Certainly. We have seen no evidence that the contacts between Iraq and Al-Qaeda developed into an operating relationship.
So, Rumsfeld's office cherry-picked intelligence to present to Congress, and there was no connection between Saddam and the 9/11 attacks. Prosecution submits Exhibit C, labeled the Downing Street Memos.
Objection, Your Honor. That's irrelevant and unsubstantiated.
Now, may I ask where you got these?
They were leaked and published by the British press, Your Honor.
Can you verify their accuracy, or do you have a deposition affidavit from someone who was there?
No, Your Honor, the British government will not officially confirm the memos.
I'm sorry, but I can't accept these as evidence.
Agent Smith, have you ever heard of the Downing Street Memos?
I certainly have. And I've spoken to my friends in British intelligence who, well, off the record, say that they are authentic.
Objection, Your Honor. That's hearsay.
Your objection is noted, Mr. Pounder. I'll listen to Agent Smith for a few more moments.
So, in your expert opinion, if the documents were authentic, which parts would be most pertinent?
Most definitely the July 23rd, 2002 memo to Tony Blair, in which the head of the British intelligence reported on his meeting with then CIA Director Tennant. The memo states that military action was seen as inevitable. Bush was going to remove Saddam through military action, justified by association with terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. But the intelligence and the facts were both being fixed around the policy.
The intelligence was being fixed around the policy. And what do you think that might mean?
Objection, Your Honor. That calls for speculation.
Sustained. Do not answer that question, Agent Smith.
That's right.
Sir, do you recall what Bush told Congress about uranium in his State of the Union address in 2003?
Yes. He said that
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
Oh my. And uranium can make nuclear bombs. That would be very disturbing if it were true. There's been a recent trial involving Vice President Cheney's Chief of Staff, Scooter Libby. Any connection to an outing of a CIA agent?
Valerie Platt, Ambassador Joseph Wilson's wife.
Now, what motivation could the White House possibly have for doing that?
Objection, again, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Sir, did the CIA send Ambassador Joseph Wilson to investigate a connection whether the country of Niger was selling uranium to Iraq?
Yes. The report came back negative. There was no connection.
And then, after the State of the Union address, Ambassador Wilson went public with his findings, basically calling Bush's statement a known lie. And that's when the White House revealed that his wife was a covert agent.
That's correct.
Your Honor, I object to this. This has nothing to do with the Libby case, and besides that, that conviction is still on appeal.
Well, all right, I'll just leave that decision to another court now.
All right. Finally, Agent Smith, let's see. Any other evidence that this administration was gearing up for war from the very beginning of its imperial reign?
Objection, Your Honor. That's gratuitous slander.
Excuse me. Of their administration.
Before he even took office, the first question from Cheney to then Defense Secretary Cohen was a briefing on Iraq. And in January 2001, in their very first week of office, the entire cabinet began discussing an attack on Iraq.
Their first week in office. And at that point, war was certainly not forced upon them, right?
That's correct.
You're a witness.
Agent Smith. Now, before these people in the courtroom here, got these sunglasses on, you got this little fake accent going on. Now, why would you be allowed to sit here and lie to these people as to who you really are? I'll tell you why. You don't even have to answer this, because it's to protect yourself. If anybody knew of all of the missions that you were on and all the danger that you posed others, you'd be put to death, would you not? Well, I don't want you to sit here and worry about that, but you have to think about what the president has done in his revealing to Congress. He actually protected literally millions of lives here in the U.S., citizens. Now, let's get to the questions at hand. You're a career intelligence officer. You've studied world history. You've been in the Middle East for the years that the prosecutor had mentioned. Now, do you know of any other way of diffusing this situation in the Middle East other than through military force?
First, let me make a comment, Mr. Pounder. Thank you for pointing out the obviousness of my disguise. I see how you've become so very successful. It is not my own well-being I worry about, but the state of my nation. And that's why we don't make policy in the intelligence unit.
Well, isn't it possible then that the president and his staff merely misinterpreted your findings? Made a mistake?
Cheney personally attended 8 CIA staff meetings, demanding more and more evidence on their weapons of mass destruction. Why would he do that unless he was after something that he knew he didn't have? And if he knew he didn't have it, then he wasn't just mistaken, was he?
We believe he was. One moment.
Agent Smith, every major intelligence service in Western Europe agreed that Saddam had, or was going to have, weapons of mass destruction. Isn't that true?
That is not true. The inspectors not found any capacity to make nuclear weapons. And that is why we urge continuing the inspections that were containing Hassan.
So you would counsel an American president to just sit back and till a madman like Saddam attacked us, and then if there was anything left, go after him.
The CIA never made a finding that Saddam Hussein intended on attacking us.
Really, Agent Smith? And we've heard the president. Isn't it true that this war is the responsibility of the CIA because of faulty intelligence?
The intelligence I oversaw counseled against war. The White House only stated reasons for war. That is not faulty intelligence, sir. That is selective reporting on some of the intelligence.
Nothing further.
Redirect, Mr. Prosecutor.
Agent Smith, in your expert opinion, was Bush's justifications for going to war true or false?
They were substantially false. They were, at bare minimum, grossly misleading.
Now, sir, you heard our president. He said that if we didn't take the war over to the terrorists would bring the war home to us. So would you say that the consensus of the foreign intelligence community is, are we safer now than after the invasion of Iraq?
The consensus experts say that this war has proven to be a great recruiting tool for Al-Qaeda. We are actually much less safe today.
Really now? Why should we believe you, sir? After all, our esteemed president and these gentlemen just said that the whole Iraq war is based on your agency's intelligence failures. And that after these failures of yours and the loss of thousands of American lives and billions of dollars of money, your boss, CIA Director George Tenet, resigned. But you know, there's something quite interesting, sir. Didn't Director Tenet receive a little going away present from President Bush when he left?
Oh, yes, he did. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, excuse me. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, for those of you who don't know, is the highest honor that our president can give.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
All right, Agent Smith, you may step down.
All rise.
Hello, sir. Speak. Yes, sir. All right. No, sir. I have no idea where these people are getting their information from. Probably from some worldwide gang trying to undermine our great nation. Yes, I believe drastic measures are necessary. Plan B? I think it's our only chance. No, don't you worry. I'll take care of everything on this end. Goodbye. Yes, this message is for O'Reilly and Fox. Tell them it's from the Vice President's office. Tell them we're moving to Plan B. Have them stand by with maps and locations of nuclear facilities in Iran. Yes, I said Iran. Tell them it's the same contingency talking points we had this morning. Good day.
What higher calling than loyalty? And yet, where in the Bible does it say that loyalty is next to godliness? Must I remain ever loyal and keep the secret of this black gold document? And now, Iran. Truth or consequences? Look at me, I'm just sweating. I have to talk to you a moment, lawyer to lawyer.
Sure. What do you want?
Listen, I don't like this, not any of it, but there's something big that's going to happen that's going to affect the outcome of this case. Pounder says steps must be taken.
What steps?
You need to be prepared for war in Iran.
What? When?
In time to make sure that this case is not decided.
Why are you telling me this?
Well, because sometimes even a lawyer has to do what is right.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man!
Listen, don't say Jesus. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be telling you this.
Well, damn! I love this. Finally coming around the bend. I got a nose in the lead and somebody shoots my horse. I guess that's it. You keep on preaching, brother.
Well, Jim, the defendants have been put on the defensive, yeah. But from what we are hearing, none of this may even matter. There's a rumor about attacking Iran. And you know what? If that happens, this trial could be over in a flash. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors.
All rise.
Be seated.
I know.
Prosecutor, I'm informed that there's an international crisis brewing, and I'm a little reluctant to continue this trial at the present moment.
An international crisis? Oh, there's always a timely crisis, Your Honor. Code red, code yellow, code orange. These people use crisis escalation like it were a row of political lifesavers.
Oh, now, this isn't a big deal,
Your Honor, if we could maybe get a copy of that oil exhibit, we would see whether I'm realistic, cynical, or just realistically cynical.
Now, which oil exhibit is that?
Still working on it, Your Honor. I've requested it of these people several times.
Mr. Founder?
Yes, Your Honor.
Where is this exhibit?
National security prerogative must be protected, Your Honor. We might be able to get you a copy of this as a redacted copy.
Redacted? I guess that's Orwell's seat for censor.
All right. Tomorrow morning, we'll be good enough. Mr. Founder? You may proceed.
Your Honor, we'd like to call Dr. Leo Strauss at the University of Chicago.
Professor Strauss, please take the stand.
Dr. Strauss, how are you?
Fine, Mr. Ben. How are you?
How's the wife and kids?
Good, thanks. Yours?
Very good, thank you for asking. Dr. Strauss, in my hand I have a copy of the Section 371 of the U.S. Code. In order to refer back and forth to this, I got a few questions in here. Now, prohibiting the defrauding of Congress, does that apply to presidents during the time of war?
The president has the power as Commander-in-Chief to do what is necessary to defend this country. Now, more than that, he has the responsibility.
There you go. Responsibility. Now, the idea of Congress declaring war. Now that's, by now, a practical fiction.
Yeah, well, Teddy Roosevelt took Panama on his own initiative. Truman went into Korea without congressional declaration of war. Reagan sent troops into Grenada, Clinton into Bosnia. The requirement for a declaration of war is no longer real in American practice.
Now, is the president required to supply every detail in advance, or can he hold something back?
Now, you don't tell the enemy when you're going to strike in advance. That would be preposterous.
Couldn't agree with him more. And therefore, you don't share with Congress all the details of a CIA report or maybe an intelligence report, do you?
That would ensure that any military effort would fail.
So it's not fraud to withhold something from Congress, is it?
It's a military necessity.
And therefore certainly not a violation of Section 371 of the U.S. Code.
Of course not. Professor,
do you have an opinion as to why no president has ever been found guilty of violating Section 371?
Yeah, that section was clearly intended to apply to witnesses testifying under oath before Congress, and not to political exhortations which are never under oath.
And therefore certainly no statements made at the State of the Union address or press conference.
Of course not.
Thank you again, Dr. Strauss.
You're welcome.
Nothing further.
Mr. Prosecutor, Ross.
Morning, sir. Morning. You're a very wise man. You've written a great deal. And you've told us today that it's not against the law for the president to deceive Congress and the American people about his intentions to go to war or even his justifications. So, sir, tell us in your expert opinion why you feel the Constitution says that the president has to go before Congress at all.
To consult.
Consult about what, sir?
About the war.
About whether it's advisable or not?
That's correct.
I'm trying to follow your logic here, sir. Explain to me why it is useful to go before the people's body without telling that body the facts. You know, it's kind of like me going to my neighbor and saying, "Hey there, fella, what do you think about me buying that horse over there?" without telling neighbor that the horse is blind, lame, and got the colic. What kind of consulting would that be?
Is that an objection, Mr. Pounder?
Of course it is, Your Honor. This is a court of law. This isn't a country pulpit. The man's making speeches.
Mr. Prosecutor, would you please ask a simple question?
Okay. So you're telling us today that it's not against the law for the president to deceive Congress if he feels it's necessary. After all, sir, you've said that it's important that the president not have to tell the enemy, which is what you just referred the Congress to as being, about when and why he's going to war. The president's got to be president, right?
That's right.
Nobody else can be president, right?
Correct.
Well then, sir, why don't you tell me who's going to be Congress? Whose job's that going to be? Who have you got in mind to consult and to advise and to weigh the consequences of what this nation does? Who's going to maintain the balance of powers that any civilized society has? Who you got in mind for that job, sir? Some unelected wonk in an ivory tower who writes in his books that empire building is okay?
I merely stated that the Commander-in-Chief cannot, must not tell the Congress everything.
Oh, you've done more than that in your book, sir. They regularly regurgitate the neocon philosophy.
Hey, you're risking contempt now, counsel.
Nothing further.
Professor? may be excused.
Thank you.
Defense. Call your next witness.
Your Honor, we call Professor Paula Jones, intimately knowledgeable of presidential history.
Mrs. Jones, please take the stand.
Madam, in a long history of the presidency, has it become customary for presidents from time to lie?
Of course. Ronald Reagan lied about the Contras. Richard Nixon lied about Watergate. They all lie.
And so, were any of them ever brought before a court to answer for these lies? Some of which were necessary to protect the nation?
Of course not.
Now, you've studied the history of war. Is it necessary for a commander to rely on deception and surprise?
Of course. In battle, deception is his greatest asset.
And so if a commander has to shade the truth or use it sparingly, then that's what the Constitution expects of him. Is it not?
Historically, the power of the president overrides that of the legislative branch when necessary to defend us. It is paramount that the commander-in-chief has the ability to do what is necessary when our nation is threatened.
Thank you. Your witness.
So, powers are paramount as long as this nation is threatened, or so long as this president says that our nation is threatened. And why? Kind of like having toast for breakfast. Presidents can just do it because they can.
Yes, they all do.
Really now, Madam, is this really, though, a case of lying to protect national security? Or perhaps could it be lying to promote an agenda?
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, calm now, Madam. You're an eminent historian. I believe we can mine history for some precedents here. For example, Johnson telling Congress about this supposed attack on one of our ships by the North Vietnamese in the Gulf of Tonkin. A total lie, designed to gin up support for a war. And his successor, Nixon, conveniently failing to tell Congress for 6 months about a secret bombing campaign in Cambodia. Congress wasn't able to make informed decisions then, were they?
I don't think it's like that at all. It's a pretty normal case of political diplomacy and talk.
Okay. Well, let's try then one more example. Let's take Iran. Let's say that we're in the midst of a conflict with Iran, and we say, we'll negotiate with you, but before we negotiate, Iran will have to consent to things that would violate their rights under international law, which you know they would never assent to. That would be a formula for escalation, don't you think?
I thought we were talking about Iraq.
Really? That's right, we are. For now. So let's move on to Iraq. We go to Saddam and say, show us proof that there isn't a single weapon of mass destruction underneath all that sand of yours. And you know that Saddam, with 12,000 pages of documents before the United Nations, can't possibly prove that. That is a program designed to fail, don't you think?
That's cynical talk.
Nothing further.
That's all we have, Your Honor.
Very well. All right, Ms. Jones, you may step down. We'll take a 5-minute recess.
All
All rise.
I'm very concerned at how things are going right now.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
Jesus, Joe.
Look, I wish you wouldn't Jesus Joe me.
Well, then Jesus God. How's that?
We'll give it to him. Do the right thing.
You know, I would be loyal to God if I could, and I would be loyal to my president if I could. But right now, I'm just twisting in the wind with this conscience. You know, it's false to imagine that somebody in the midst of moral uncertainty somehow decides. I don't decide. I'm compelled. Truth and consequences. And I'm no longer sweating. You know, if Jesus speaks to the president, he's saying something different than he is to me. I've got something to show you. Take a look at this and just say you got it in a Freedom of Information request or whatever, but forget you spoke to me.
The oil exhibit.
All rise.
Be seated. Madam, do you have a rebuttal?
Well, we do have one more exhibit, Your Honor.
All right, what is it?
We call it the oil exhibit, Your Honor. Proof of a motive for telling lies. Here is a list of foreign oil companies lined up to get contracts from Saddam Hussein.
Where did you get that, Your Honor? That's a national security. I object to this, Your Honor.
Can you authenticate this, counsel?
Well, I think Mr. Pounder just did. He just told the court it was a national security document. If it wasn't real, he'd not be screaming. The date is March 2001, 6 weeks after Mr. Cheney came to power, and it was provided to his Secret Energy Policy Task Force. The document they were looking at is entitled Foreign Suitors for Iraqi Oilfield Contracts. It lists countries A through Z, each one with an assigned location in Iraq. Prosecution submits Exhibit D.
All right, well, where did you get this?
It was obtained in response to a Freedom of Information Act request, Your Honor. You can see the official stamp of the Department of Commerce.
Yes.
Maintained in the usual course of business.
Well, so if it was obtained pursuant to a Freedom of Information request, it must be authentic. Mr. Pounder, your objection is overruled. This exhibit will be labeled and entered into evidence. Now, you may proceed, counsel. One question, where on this list was the United States?
Ah, that was the problem. The United States wasn't on the list. If something wasn't done to remove Saddam Hussein, every one of those countries was ahead in line of the United States for Iraqi oil.
Now, are you saying that if we didn't go to war to unseat Saddam, that all of his oil would be pledged to someone else? And that was the major motivation to cause them to go to war?
Well, the CIA witness testified this morning that this was not a war on terrorism. This was a war against Saddam Hussein. Here's why. In March 2001, Cheney's Energy Task Force demanded the full list of countries operating in Iraq. And they found that all those countries were negotiating contracts. Inspections for weapons of mass destruction wouldn't get those countries off the list. Sanctions wouldn't get those countries out. There was no legal way to get those countries out. And all the while, Americans' oil industry had been outmaneuvered during 12 years of sanctions. War was the only answer.
Well, I must say, it does suggest motive.
Objection, Your Honor. We don't know what else they were looking at. They could have been looking at all the oil reserves in the world. You don't have a copy of the minutes to the Energy Task Force meetings, do you?
Mr. Prosecutor.
No, Your Honor. We tried to get those minutes, sir, but Mr. Cheney fought us all the way to the Supreme Court. They must contain something quite embarrassing. The black gold exhibit suggests motive. And a good motive makes this war seem much less like a mistake, which is their only defense.
Objection, Your Honor. Hold on a second. That's irrelevant.
All right, counsel. What about these oil reserves?
Let's just think this through. The defendants sent their friend Ahmed Chalabi to Iraq in the first month of the invasion.
We still object, Your Honor. What Chalabi did has nothing to do with this case.
Now, how is this Chalabi relevant to the case, please?
Under the interim Iraqi government, Chalabi was the oil minister. He rewrote all those contracts and threw the black gold list out the window. What did the war accomplish? It erased all those countries off the black gold list, and now the defendants are in charge of who gets that oil. There's no failure in Iraq for them. This is a completely successful result, if your purpose was oil.
Your Honor, serious matters are brewing here. Casting doubts on the President's motive is tantamount to allowing the courts rule over foreign affairs. To be interested in oil is no crime. We object to this whole line of reasoning.
Now, this oil exhibit does suggest a motive not related to terrorism, and this argument will be considered. Objection overruled. All right.
We're ready to close now, Your Honor. Thank you, sir. This has been a most illuminating day. Today, we established that these defendants lied about their intentions for going to war and lied about their justifications for war, having planned it from the moment that they took office. They were already performing war acts well before the official start of this conflict. And then came September 11th. the new Pearl Harbor. It gave this administration a clean slate to attack anyone, anywhere. Unfortunately for them and their goals, the attackers did not come from Iraq. So the next 15 months were spent trying to establish a connection. Bulletproof, said former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. We know there's an Iraq 9/11 connection, said Dick Cheney. But they didn't know, and they knew they did not know. Your Honor, there are some who have spoken before this court today who say that it is okay for a president to lie and to deceive the American people. But how can Congress perform its constitutional duty without the true facts?
Your Honor, we can no longer tolerate not knowing who these people really work for.
Mr. Public Interest Prosecutor, would you like to put this question of standing to rest now?
He wants to know whom we represent.
I think we all do.
We the people.
I guess he wants to know how you have an interest in this.
Well, Your Honor, we don't have a vested property interest. We've just spent our lives loving the law as you do, sir, having learned from our childhoods to appreciate it as the crown jewel of our civilization. We've inherited our rights, sir, just like you, just like every other American.
That won't work, Your Honor. Anybody could come to court under those premises.
Easy, Mr. Founder. Now, you say you represent just you?
We the people.
Well, Your Honor, we believe others will stand with us for democracy and against tyranny. With your permission.
All right. Very well, Mr. Bailiff. You read this, please, to the
Yes, Your Honor.
court.
All those who stand with the prosecution for democracy, please rise. You may be seated. Thank you.
Now let the real patriots stand with our president and vice president. You see, that's what I'm talking about.
You got the money, they got the people.
All right, from what I can see, you do represent others and not just yourselves. Defense, you may proceed to your closing statements.
Your Honor, for what reason a man and his organization and the allegiance that he has to it would attack his own country, we don't know. You should dismiss this case, Your Honor. Let the courts be in balance with the executive and not ruling over the executive.
Your Honor, I have a prepared statement from the Office of the President.
Very well.
Civilization is not maintained by weakness or by cowardice. These times demand firm leadership. That is why the Constitution gives the President extraordinary powers. Because times of war are not like times of peace. The President is fully entitled to make judgments about when and where to defend this country. We cannot afford to wait for the next plane to fly into the next tower, or a bomb to go off in a seaport, or a bridge to come tumbling down. Idealists think this Magna Carta or Constitution will hold back evil. It will not. Only strength, will, and the courage to do so. The court should not restrain our leaders when they need the freedom to lead. When our work is done, there will be time to make peace, but civilization has not yet gotten to that place. And until it does, the world does not need... The world needs the United States.
Your Honor.
Good God Almighty, my God, this is terrible.
War.
This is awful. This is most disturbing. I've just been informed that the United States has bombed nuclear facilities in Iran.
Iran?
That's correct, Iran, sir.
How sad. How sad that the world should come to this. But there it is, Your Honor. The need for strength. We have enemies on all sides. We're at war, an ever-expanding war, and no vice president has ever been subjected to such courtroom theatrics such as this. You must dismiss this case, Your Honor.
Mr. Prosecutor, I'm not inclined to meddle in the affairs of this government or hamper the executive branch in its execution of its powers. So we are through here. But before the court rules, you're entitled to a final rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Pounder and Mr. Ranger would have you suspend the law so that President Bush may get another war started. Haven't you heard this before, sir? We're in the midst of 2 wars, and now this president wants to start another. If you allow this president to get away with this, you will contribute to the setting back of our legal traditions and our living law of 700 years. When I was young, I was taught that the rule of law was important. We never did think that we would see a king again, not in a blue suit and a red tie. We never did think that we would see that again, sir. People rest, Your Honor.
Neither side will have any objection, I believe. In the interest of democracy, I take this case under advisement.
What? You promised to dismiss this case, Your Honor.
Mr. Pounder, I think I said inclined, which is not the same as promised. I believe you all here tonight have given me quite a bit to think about. Constitution, rule of law, Magna Carta, potential motive. Indeed, quite a bit. Court will be in recess.
All rise.
Jim, the court was about to dismiss the case, but at the last minute it changed its mind and took the matter under consideration. Now, according to the prosecution, the issue is the rule of law, and this business about Iran is just a smokescreen to cover the expansion of presidential power. The defense says that in the never-ending war on terrorism, the president can do whatever in his sole discretion he considers necessary. They say the law has to bend when the lives of millions are at risk. While they were leaving the courthouse, I asked the prosecutor what could happen next. And here's what he told me. He said, quote, "Well, I said in there that the people rest, but I was wrong. The people will never rest." And that's the story for now, live from the Court of Public Opinion. Stay tuned.
This nation fights reluctantly because we know the cost, and we dread the days of mourning that always come. We seek peace. We strive for peace. We seek peace. We strive for peace.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
There are such things as roving wiretaps. Now, by the way, anytime you hear the United States government talking about wiretap, a wiretap requires a court order. Nothing has changed, by the way. When we're talking about chasing down terrorists, we're talking about getting a court order before we do so. It's important for our fellow citizens to understand, when you think Patriot Act, constitutional guarantees are in place.
Why did you skip the basic safeguards of asking courts for permission for the intercepts?
We use FISA still. You're referring to the FISA court in your question. Of course we use FISAs. But FISAs is for long-term monitoring. What is needed in order to protect the American people is the ability to move quickly to detect. Now, having suggested this idea, I then obviously went to the question, is it legal to do so? I swore to uphold the laws. Do I have the legal authority to do this? And the answer is absolutely. As I mentioned in my remarks, the legal authority is derived from the Constitution, as well as the authorization of force by the United States Congress.